The distress signal came at 0347 hours, cutting through the silence of space like a scream. Commander Daniel Brooks stood on the bridge of the Earth defense vessel Starbound Hope, watching the message play on repeat. The voice belonged to a woman, her words broken by static and fear. She was begging for help. She was saying that they were everywhere. She was saying that the children were dying. Then the signal went dead. Daniel had served in the fleet for 22 years. He had seen border skirmishes and pirate attacks and diplomatic incidents that almost became wars. But something in that woman's voice made his blood run cold. He ordered the fleet to maximum speed and prayed they would arrive in time. They did not. New Eden had been humanity's proudest achievement. The colony world sat on the edge of explored space, a green and blue jewel that reminded everyone of Earth. Over 2 million people had built their lives there. They had farms and schools and hospitals. They had theaters where children performed plays for their parents. They had parks where old couples walked hand in hand and remembered their youth. When the Starbound Hope emerged from fold space above New Eden, Daniel saw only fire. The Valkyrie Dominion had come without warning. The insectoid species had always viewed humanity with contempt. They were an old race, proud and cruel, and they believed that younger species existed only to serve or die. For decades, human diplomats had tried to build bridges with them. They had signed treaties and trade agreements. They had believed that patience and kindness would eventually win the Valkyrie over. The Valkyrie had smiled at human diplomats while there war. Fleets prepared in secret. Lieutenant Commander Amy Hart led the first ground team into the ruins of the capital city. She was 34 years old and had grown up on a colony much like New Eden. She had joined the fleet because she believed in protecting people. She believed that humanity's role in the galaxy was to be a force for good. Walking through those streets changed her forever. The Valkyrie had not simply attacked New Eden. They had hunted its people like animals. Amy found bodies in homes and schools, in the underground shelters where families had tried to hide. The aliens had used weapons designed to cause maximum suffering. They had taken their time. They had enjoyed it. She found a playground where children's toys lay scattered in the ash. A small teddy bear, burned on one side, stared up at her with button eyes. Amy picked it up and held it against her chest. And for the first time in her adult life, she wept. Admiral Patricia Cole received the footage aboard the Constellation, the flagship of Earth's defense fleet. She was 61 years old and had spent her entire career believing in peace. She had written papers about conflict resolution. She had trained a generation of officers to see war as a failure of imagination. Her daughter had lived on New Eden. Her son-in-law had been a teacher there. Her 2 grandchildren, ages 7 and 4, had been learning to ride bicycles. Patricia watched the footage in silence. She watched the bodies and the ruins and the evidence of systematic slaughter. She watched until the screen went dark, and then she sat alone in her quarters for a very long time. When she emerged, something had changed in her eyes. The United Earth Council convened an emergency session 3 days later. Representatives from every human world gathered in the great chamber, their faces pale with grief and shock. President Marcus Webb stood at the podium, a man who had built his career on optimism and hope. Behind him, photographs of New Eden played on massive screens. Photographs of the dead. Photographs of the destruction. Photographs that would haunt humanity for generations. For 80 years, Marcus began, his voice steady despite everything. We have extended our hand in friendship to every species we encountered. We believed that the universe was vast enough for all of us. We believed that cooperation was stronger than conflict. We believed that if we showed the galaxy our best nature, they would respond with theirs. He paused, looking out at the assembly. We signed the Galactic Accords and limited our military to defensive forces only. We shared our technology freely. We welcomed alien visitors to our worlds and treated them as honored guests. We did everything we could to prove that humanity wanted nothing but peace. The photographs continued to cycle behind him. A child's drawing, half burned. A wedding dress in the rubble. A family portrait. The glass cracked, but the smiling faces still visible. The Volcari watched us do all of this, Marcus continued. They sat across from our diplomats and nodded politely. They signed agreements they never intended to honor. They smiled at us while they planned the murder of 2,300,000 innocent people. His hands gripped the podium. They thought our kindness was weakness. They thought our desire for peace meant we were incapable of war. They thought they could slaughter our children and we would simply accept it. Marcus Webb had never been a military man. He had never raised his voice in anger. He had always believed that calm reason could solve any problem. But when he spoke again, there was something new in his voice. Something cold and hard and ancient. They were wrong. The chamber erupted. Some representatives shouted for immediate war. Others called for calm and diplomatic solutions. A few simply wept, overwhelmed by the horror of what had happened. Admiral Cole stood in the back of the chamber, watching it all. She thought about her grandchildren, about the lives they would never live and the dreams they would never chase. She thought about the teddy bear that Amy Hart had found in the ashes. She thought about a facility buried deep beneath the mountains of Colorado. A facility that officially did not exist. A facility that held weapons humanity had built and then hidden away, hoping they would never be needed. Those weapons had been created by people who understood something that the optimists refused to accept. Peace was wonderful. Cooperation was admirable. But the universe was old and dark and full of species that saw kindness as an invitation to attack. Humanity had prepared for this day while praying it would never come. As the council debated and argued and wept, Patricia Cole slipped out of the chamber. She had calls to make and orders to give. The time for diplomacy was over. The time for grief would come later, when there was nothing left to do. Right now, there was only one thing that mattered. The Volcari had awakened something in humanity. Something that had slept since the species first crawled out of the caves and looked up at the stars with wonder. Something dark and terrible and patient. They had wanted to teach humanity a lesson about power. They were about to learn one instead. 6 months had passed since the war ended. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Volcari Dominion existed only in history books now, reduced to a single world struggling to rebuild a society that had been based entirely on military conquest. Their former subject species were establishing their own governments, tentatively exploring freedoms they had not known for thousands of years. And humanity had become something new, something that the rest of the galaxy watched with a mixture of respect and fear. Ambassador Linda Shaw returned to the Galactic Assembly for the first time since delivering the ultimatum to the Volcari. The great chamber was full. Representatives from 47 species crowded into their seats. Some had traveled for weeks to be here. No one wanted to miss what the humans would say. Linda walked to the central podium, a small woman in simple robes surrounded by towering aliens who had once looked at her species with contempt. She felt their eyes on her, felt the tension in the air. "We did not want this war," she began, her voice clear and steady. "I know some of you don't believe that. I know some of you think humanity was always planning to reveal its true nature and dominate the galaxy. But I want to tell you the truth." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives who had secretly hoped for humanity's destruction. "We spent 80 years building a civilization based on cooperation and peace. We signed every accord. We shared our technology. We limited our weapons. We genuinely, sincerely believed that the universe was big enough for all of us to thrive together." Linda's voice grew heavier. "We were naive. The Valkyrie taught us that some species see kindness as weakness. Some species interpret peace as submission. Some species will never respond to diplomacy because they believe only in power. She pulled up images on the display behind her. New Eden before and after. The smiling colonists and the burned ruins. The playgrounds and the ashes. 2,300,000 people died because we believed in the good nature of others. Children died. Families were erased. An entire world was murdered because we trusted too much. Linda let the images speak for themselves for a long moment. So let me be clear about humanity's position going forward. We will never fire first. We will always seek diplomatic solutions. We will continue to believe in cooperation and mutual benefit. We will extend our hand in friendship to any species that wants peace. Our voice grew cold. But if any species ever again mistakes our civility for weakness, they will discover what the Valkyrie discovered. We have weapons that can unmake stars. We have the will to use them. And we will never again allow the murder of our people to go unanswered. She gathered her notes. We have returned to civility. But civility is now a choice we make, not a constraint we accept. We choose to be kind. We choose to be peaceful. We choose to cooperate with our neighbors. Linda looked around the chamber one final time. Do not make us choose differently. The assembly was silent as she walked out. No one clapped. No one spoke. They simply watched this small human woman leave. And they remembered what her species had done when pushed too far. Admiral Patricia Cole retired 3 weeks after the war ended. She could not bear the medals they wanted to give her, could not stomach being called a hero. She had done what was necessary, but the weight of it pressed down on her every day. She bought a small house on a quiet colony world and tried to find peace. She planted a garden and read old books and avoided the news broadcasts that still discussed the war. Sometimes she slept without nightmares. Sometimes she didn't single quotes T. Amy Hart visited her once a year after the war. They sat on the porch as the sun set. Now they're speaking for a long time. Do you regret it? Amy finally asked. Patricia thought about the question carefully. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that the Valkyrie gave us no other choice. I regret that I had to become someone I never wanted to be. She looked at the sunset, colors painting the sky in shades of orange and red. But I don't regret protecting humanity. I don't regret showing the galaxy that our children's lives have value. I don't regret making sure that no species will ever again think they can slaughter us without consequences. Captain Greg Palmer transferred to a diplomatic protection detail after the war. He couldn't command a warship anymore. Couldn't sit in that chair and remember what he had done. But he still believed in protecting people. So he found a different way to serve. He guarded ambassadors now, keeping them safe as they traveled to distant worlds and tried to rebuild the trust that the war had shattered. It was quieter work, less exciting, but it felt cleaner somehow. The weapons were returned to their vaults beneath the mountains of Colorado. Dr. Nathan Price oversaw the process personally, making sure every warhead was accounted for, every drone was deactivated, every terrible creation was locked away in the darkness. I hope we never need them again, he said to the empty vault. But he didn't destroy them. None of the human leaders even suggested it. The galaxy had shown them what happened to species that could not defend themselves, and they would never forget that lesson. Humanity resumed its role as the optimists of the galaxy. Human diplomats traveled to distant worlds, smiling and offering friendship. Human scientists shared their discoveries freely. Human merchants traded fairly and complained about unfair tariffs. Human tourists marveled at alien architecture and tried strange foods and bought souvenirs for their families. From the outside, nothing had changed. But everyone who dealt with humans noticed something different now. A shadow behind the smiles. a weighty behind the kind words, an awareness that the friendly people across the negotiating table had weapons that could erase civilizations from existence. The 11 species freed from Velkari domination sent representatives to Earth, seeking alliance with the humans who had liberated them. They wanted protection, wanted to stand in the shadow of the species that had destroyed their oppressors. Ambassador Shaw met with them all, accepting their friendship while gently refusing their worship. "We're not your saviors," she told them. "We're not your masters. We're just your neighbors. We want to live in peace with you, to trade with you, to learn from you and share what we know." She smiled, and they saw something ancient and dangerous behind her kind eyes. "Just don't ever give us a reason to become something else." Years passed. The memory of the war faded from the headlines, but never from the collective consciousness of the galaxy. New species joined the Galactic Assembly, and their elders told them about humanity, about the friendly people who smiled and offered cooperation, about the terrible weapons that slept beneath their mountains, about the massacre of New Eden and the destruction that followed. "Be kind to the humans," the elders always said. "They will be kind in return, but never, ever make them angry, because they remember what they are capable of, and they will do it again if they must." Humanity had learned a terrible lesson about itself. The galaxy had learned it too. Some species were peaceful because they had no choice. They lacked the strength or the will or the weapons to be anything else. Humanity was peaceful because they chose to be, because they genuinely believed in the better nature of sentient beings, because they wanted to build a galaxy where all species could thrive together. But they could always choose differently, and the galaxy would never forget it. The massive ship appeared above New York City on a cold morning in March 2187. It was silver and shaped like a teardrop, and it hung in the sky without making any sound. People stopped in the streets and looked up. Some ran, some screamed. Most just stood there with their phones, recording what would become the most watched video in human history. Danny Liu was eating breakfast in his small apartment in Washington, D.C., when his phone buzzed. He was 42 years old, a commander in the United Earth Defense Force, and he had spent his entire career preparing for something that most people thought would never happen. First contact with alien life. He grabbed his jacket and ran to his car. By the time he reached the Pentagon, the ship had been joined by 11 others. They now hovered over every major city on Earth. "What do we know?" Danny asked as he entered the Situation Room. Colonel Patricia Vance looked up from her screen. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. "They sent a message 20 minutes ago. They want to meet. They're calling themselves the Galactic Council." Secretary General Maria Santos arrived from the United Nations headquarters 3 hours later. She was a small woman with dark hair and a calm voice that had helped her negotiate peace deals on 4 continents. Now she would try to negotiate with beings from another world. The meeting took place in Geneva. The aliens walked down a ramp from their ship, and the whole world watched on television. There were 3 of them. The leader was tall and thin, with skin that looked like purple crystal. Her eyes were large and completely black, and when she spoke, her voice sounded like wind chimes. "I am Ambassador Kethra of the Valori," she said. "We represent the Galactic Council, the governing body of 12 spacefaring species. We have watched your world for some time. You have reached a level of development that requires our attention." Maria stepped forward. Danny stood behind her with a team of soldiers, their weapons hidden but ready. "We welcome you in peace," Maria said. "Humanity has long wondered if we were alone in the universe. We are honored to learn that we are not." Kethra made a sound that might have been laughter. "Your honor is noted. Now, let us discuss the terms of your integration into the galactic community." She produced a small device that projected glowing text into the air. Danny read the words and felt his stomach drop. The terms were not terms at all. They were demands. Earth would surrender 70% of its natural resources to Council mining operations. Humans would provide workers for Council projects across the galaxy. A permanent Council presence would be established on Earth to ensure compliance. In exchange, humanity would receive protection from external threats and limited access to galactic trade. This is not a negotiation, Kethra explained when Maria tried to ask questions. This is how lesser species join the galactic community. Every species we have encountered has accepted these terms. You should consider yourselves fortunate. Some civilizations were simply destroyed. Danny watched Maria's hands. They were shaking slightly, but her voice remained steady. And if we refuse? Kethra's black eyes seemed to grow even darker. No species refuses. The Council fleet numbers in the hundreds of thousands. Your entire planet could be subjugated in a matter of days. Your weapons are primitive. Your ships cannot leave your own solar system. You have no allies, no resources, and no hope of resistance. These are facts, not threats. The meeting ended without agreement, but everyone knew that it was only a delay. The Council gave Earth 1 month to accept the terms. If humanity refused, they would face the consequences. That night, Danny sat in a secure room beneath the Pentagon with his most trusted officers. Lieutenant Samantha Brooks had spent the entire day analyzing data they had secretly collected during the meeting. She was young, only 28, but she was the smartest person Danny had ever met. "They're arrogant," Samantha said quietly. She pulled up holographic displays showing Council ship designs, weapon signatures, and communication frequencies. They didn't even bother to encrypt their transmissions while they were here. They let us scan their ship without any countermeasures. They don't see us as a threat at all. "Because we're not," said Captain Kevin Park. He was a pilot, one of the best in the fleet, and he had spent the day running simulations against Council vessels. "I ran the numbers 100 times. Our best fighters would last about 30 seconds against one of their patrol ships. That's with our current technology," Samantha said. She looked at Danny with something in her eyes that he recognized: hope. "Sir, their shields operate on a predictable frequency rotation. 12 cycles repeating. If we could build weapons that adapt faster than 12 cycles, we could bypass their shields entirely," Danny finished. Samantha nodded. "It would take time. Years, probably. And we would need to hide everything from them." Danny stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the night sky was clear, and he could see the Council ship hovering over the city like a silver moon. Somewhere up there, Kethra was probably sleeping peacefully, confident that these primitive humans would soon submit like every other species had. She was wrong. "Start the project tonight," Danny said. "Use only people we trust absolutely. Nothing on any network, nothing digital. Paper records only, stored in locations they would never think to look." "What do we tell the Secretary General?" Kevin asked. Danny turned back to face his team. "We tell her that we're preparing to comply with the Council's terms." We smile. We nod. We do everything they ask. And while we're doing that, we build something they've never seen before. And then? Samantha asked. Danny thought about his daughter, who was 12 years old and dreaming of becoming an astronaut. He thought about all the children on Earth who would grow up as slaves to an alien empire if humanity gave up now. He thought about every war humanity had ever fought, every time they had faced impossible odds and refused to surrender. "And then," he said slowly, "we show them what happens when you try to conquer Earth." The next month passed quickly. Maria Santos signed the integration agreement in a ceremony broadcast to every screen on the planet. Kethra smiled her strange, crystalline smile and welcomed humanity to the galactic community. Most people cried. Some celebrated, believing the aliens would share their advanced technology and solve all of Earth's problems. Danny watched the ceremony from his secret bunker in the Rocky Mountains. Around him, A team of engineers and scientists worked on projects that would take years to complete. They had no guarantee of success. They had no way of knowing if their plan would work, but they had something the Council did not expect. They had hope. And they had time. The Council had conquered hundreds of worlds. They had never failed. They believed humanity was just another primitive species that would accept its fate. They were about to learn how wrong they were. 6 months had passed since the integration began, and Earth was bleeding. The Valori had established mining operations across 3 continents. Giant machines tore into mountains and drained lakes, extracting minerals that humanity had never even heard of. The Council called it harvesting. The people who lived near the mines called it destruction. The Krethnur came next. They were insectoid creatures, 7 feet tall with hard shells and multiple arms. They were responsible for managing the human workforce, and they did their job with cold efficiency. Every day, thousands of humans were transported to work sites across the planet. Some were sent off-world, loaded onto transport ships, and never seen again. Carlos Mendez watched one of those transports lift off from what used to be Los Angeles. He was 40 years old, a former Marine who had served 3 tours in conflicts that now seemed so small compared to what humanity faced. He had a scar across his left cheek and hands that were rough from years of hard work. "That's the 5th transport this week," said Grace Kim. She stood beside him in the shadow of a ruined building, her tablet recording the ship's departure. Grace was 35, an aerospace engineer who had worked for NASA before the invasion. Now she worked for the Resistance. Carlos nodded slowly. "How many people?" "Maybe 500. They're taking more each month." They walked through empty streets to a hidden entrance that led underground. The tunnels had been built decades ago as emergency shelters. Now they served as the headquarters for the resistance movement that was slowly spreading across the planet. Inside the main chamber, screens covered the walls showing feeds from hidden cameras all over the world. Men and women worked at makeshift stations, coordinating with resistance cells on every continent. They communicated using methods the Council had never seen before, like written notes passed by hand, coded messages hidden in old radio frequencies, and signals buried in the noise of everyday life. Carlos stood before a large table covered with maps and documents. Around him gathered the leaders of the resistance. Some were soldiers like him. Others were scientists, engineers, doctors, and ordinary people who had decided they would rather die fighting than live as slaves. "What's our status?" Carlos asked. A young man named Tony Reyes pulled up a holographic display. He was their communications expert, barely 25 years old, but brilliant with technology. "We've got active cells in 42 countries. Membership is growing every day. The Council thinks they've broken us, but they've actually united us for the first time in history." "That's good," Carlos said. "But it's not enough. We need weapons. Real weapons." Grace stepped forward. She had been working in secret for months, and the exhaustion showed on her face. But there was also excitement in her eyes. "I have something." She placed a small device on the table. It looked like a metal cylinder about 6 inches long. Nothing special to look at. But when she pressed a button on its side, the air around it shimmered. "This is a prototype shield disruptor," Grace explained. "The Council shields work by rotating through 12 different frequencies. Our weapons can't penetrate because they can't predict which frequency will be active at any moment. This device reads the shield frequency in real time and adjusts our weapon output to match." Carlos picked up the cylinder and turned it over in his hands. "You're saying this will let us shoot through their shields?" "Better than that. I'm saying this will let us shoot through their shields before they even know we're targeting them." The room went silent. Everyone understood what this meant. For the first time since the invasion began, They had a chance. How long until we can produce these at scale? Carlos asked. Grace hesitated. That's the problem. Each unit requires materials we don't have easy access to. We would need to steal them from Council supply depots. Then we steal them. Meanwhile, on the Council observation vessel Eternal Judgment, Commander Vertex reviewed his daily reports with growing concern. Vortex was Krethina, a veteran of 50 planetary subjugations. He had never encountered a species quite like humans. Production is down again, his subordinate reported. Human workers in the Asian mining sector have decreased output by 32% this month alone. Vertex clicked his mandibles in frustration. Sabotage? Unknown, Commander. The humans claim equipment failures and illness. We have found no evidence of coordinated resistance. That was what bothered Vertex the most. He had overseen hundreds of conquered populations, and he knew the signs of rebellion. Open defiance was easy to crush. But the humans showed no open defiance. They smiled. They obeyed. They did exactly what they were told, and yet things kept going wrong. Equipment broke down in ways that seemed accidental. Supply shipments went missing. Council soldiers disappeared while on patrol, their bodies found days later in remote locations. Each incident could be explained, but there were too many incidents. There is something wrong with these creatures, Vertex said quietly. They do not behave like any species we have conquered before. They are merely primitive, his subordinate said dismissively. They will accept their place in time. No. Vortex stared at the holographic image of Earth rotating slowly before him. There is something in their eyes. I have seen fear in conquered peoples. I have seen anger. I have seen despair. But the humans, they look at us with something else. What, Commander? Vertex was silent for a long moment. Patience, he finally said. They look at us like they are waiting for something. He transmitted a message to the Council that night, requesting additional forces. The message was received and filed. No one took it seriously. The humans were primitive. They had no ships, no weapons, no chance. Why would the Council waste resources on a planet that was already defeated? Deep in the Rocky Mountains, Danny Liu received Grace's report through a chain of messengers that took 3 days to reach him. He read it twice, then burned the paper as he had burned hundreds of others. Samantha Brooks sat across from him, working on calculations that filled dozens of notebooks. We're 18 months ahead of schedule, she said. If Grace's technology works, we could be ready to move within a year. It will work, Danny said. He had faith in Grace. He had faith in all of them. What about the ships? Samantha pulled out another notebook. Hidden shipyards had been constructed in locations the Council would never think to look. Beneath the Pacific Ocean, inside hollowed-out mountains, under the ice of Antarctica. Each shipyard was building vessels designed from scratch using human engineering combined with stolen Council technology. 47 complete, Samantha said. Another 200 in various stages of construction. If we push production, we could have over 400 by the time we're ready to move. Danny closed his eyes. 400 ships against a fleet of hundreds of thousands. The numbers were still impossible. But numbers had never won wars by themselves. Courage won wars. Intelligence won wars. The will to fight when all hope seemed lost won wars. And if there was one thing humans had proven throughout their history, it was that they never stopped fighting. Tell Grace to proceed with the raids, Danny said. We get her the material she needs, no matter the cost. The resistance struck 6 Council supply depots that month. Each raid was quick and precise, executed by teams who had trained in secret for months. They took what they needed and disappeared before the Council could respond. Vertex studied the reports and felt something he had not felt in decades. Fear that the humans were planning something. He was certain of it now. But by the time he convinced the council to take the threat seriously, it would be too late. The waiting was almost over. The Great Hall of Kethver was silent. 12 species had sent their leaders to this meeting, and all of them sat waiting for High Arbiter Zolthan to speak. The Velthari were the most powerful race in the known galaxy. They had conquered world after world for thousands of years. No one had ever said no to them until now. Zolthan's body glowed with a soft blue light. This was how the Velthari showed their emotions. Blue meant he was calm, but everyone in the room knew that would change soon. He held up a small device and pressed a button. A hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed a small planet covered in green and brown patches. "This is New Kansas," Zolthan said. "A human colony on the edge of their territory. 3 generations ago, this world was nothing but rock and poison air. The humans changed it. They made it livable. Now 8 million of them call it home." One of the other leaders, a creature with 4 arms and gray skin, leaned forward. "Why do we care about this small world?" "Because we told the humans to give it to us," Zolthan replied. "We told them to pay tribute like every other species. We told them to accept our rule." He paused. His glow shifted from blue to orange. This meant anger. They said no. Whispers filled the room. No one said no to the Velthari. It simply did not happen. The last species to refuse had been wiped out completely. Their planet was now a mining colony. Commander Vorik stood up from his seat. He was tall even for a Velthari, with sharp edges on his body that looked like natural armor. He had led dozens of conquests and never lost a single battle. "Let me take the Crimson Legion," he said. 2,000 of our best warriors. We will crush these humans and make an example of them. The other species will see what happens when anyone refuses us." Zolthan nodded slowly. "The humans have no real military. They are farmers and builders. This should be simple." Far away, on the colony world of New Kansas, Captain Danny Holt stood on the observation deck of an orbital station. He was a tall man with tired eyes and gray starting to show in his brown hair. He had joined the Colonial Defense Force 20 years ago, thinking he would never see real combat. The human colonies had been at peace for a long time. That peace was about to end. Lieutenant Maria Santos walked up behind him. She was young, maybe 25, with dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. She held a datapad in her hands, and her face was pale. "Sir, we have a problem." Danny did not turn around. He kept looking out the window at the planet below. He could see the lights of the main city, where his sister lived with her 2 children. He could see the farmlands to the north, where his parents had worked until they died. "Tell me," he said. Long-range sensors picked up a fleet. Velthari warships. 47 of them. Now Danny turned around. He took the datapad and looked at the numbers. 47 ships meant this was not a scouting mission. This was an invasion force. How long until they get here? 3 days, maybe 4. Danny handed the pad back to her. His mind was already working through the problem. New Kansas had a small defense force. 2,000 soldiers, mostly trained for police work and disaster response. They had some weapons, but nothing that could match Velthari technology. The aliens had been conquering worlds for longer than humans had been traveling through space. "Get me Admiral Price on a secure channel," he said, "and send a message to all defense commanders. Meeting in 2 hours." Maria nodded and hurried away. Danny turned back to the window. He thought about his grandmother, who had come to this world on the first colony ship. She used to tell him stories about what it was like back then. The air was thin and hard to breathe. The soil was full of chemicals that killed any plant they tried to grow. Half the colonists died in the first 10 years, but they did not give up. They built machines to clean the air. They brought bacteria that ate the poison in the soil. They worked and died, and worked some more until the world became green. Danny had been born outside, under an open sky. He was the first person in his family to take a breath without a mask. His grandmother had cried when she held him for the first time. "We made this world," she had told him. "We gave everything for it. Never let anyone take it from you." 2 hours later, Danny stood in front of 30 officers in the underground bunker. The room was plain and gray, built for function rather than comfort. A large screen on the wall showed the approaching Velthari fleet. "Here's what we know," Danny said. "The Velthari have never fought humans before. They think we are weak because we do not have natural weapons like claws or armor. They think we will run away because we are soft." He pressed a button, and the screen changed to show images of Velthari soldiers. They were tall creatures with hard shells covering their bodies. Their arms ended in sharp points that could cut through metal. They are stronger than us. They are faster than us. Their weapons are better than ours. One of the officers, a young man named Pete Crawford, raised his hand. "Sir, how are we supposed to win?" Danny smiled. It was not a happy smile. "We are not going to fight them the way they expect. We are not going to line up and shoot at each other until one side falls down. That is how they fight. That is how they have always won." He changed the screen again. This time, it showed maps of the colony, tunnels, drainage systems, abandoned buildings, forest areas. "We are going to fight like humans have always fought when we are outnumbered. We are going to hide. We are going to strike when they do not expect it. We are going to make them bleed for every step they take on our world." He looked around the room at the faces of his officers. Some of them looked scared. Some of them looked determined. All of them were listening. "I will not lie to you. Many of us will die. But our grandparents did not build this world so we could give it away. Our parents did not spend their lives making a home for us so we could run when things got hard." Danny stood up straight. His voice was firm. "They want our world. They cannot have it. Now let us get to work." The officers stood up and saluted. They had 3 days to prepare for a war no one thought they could win. It was not much time, but humans had done impossible things before.